The year 2002, in a little unknown console, the PlayStation 2, there was an interesting game that had come out. A game that was both a family-friendly product and not. There were two big companies at the time that had created this gem of a game, Disney and Square Enix. Those who know what I'm talking about would know what game this is. This game is Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts is a massive series of games. When I first decided to start this massive series of games, I was nervous because I didn't think I would be able to get all of these games completed in a short span of time. Because usually when you play a series of games, you would not be able to finish. You would start with the first game, not really like it, and then never get to the rest of the other games. So I thought, hey, this is going to be the same situation. But then I decided to just dive in and try it out. Lo and behold, some of my favorite games have come out of this entire series. And the start is a very interesting one. It is not my favorite, of course, but it's a rather interesting look at early Square Enix. Mind you, Square Enix was not much known for other than their Final Fantasy series at the time. This is 2002. Well, Square was known for their Final Fantasy series. When they combined with Enix at the time, they weren't known for much besides Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. So, when a combination of Disney and Square Enix, you would think, how does this even work? Disney has made their own games, that's for sure. There is Disney original titles. So there's like Disney Incredibles, Disney Monsters Inc., or Disney Pixar's Monsters Inc., and all those types of games on the PS2. But those were their own movie tie-in games. However, an original title surrounding Square Enix's masterful storytelling was obviously going to be a big surprise to me. So when I finally tried it out, it was. What does Kingdom Hearts really have to offer though? There's many things that Kingdom Hearts has to offer. It has an expansive world. Well, I say expansive, but the right word should really be convoluted, because later down the line it does get a little bit more convoluted than it initially seems. However, in the early stages it is rather an interesting story. To start, one of the more interesting aspects of the first game at least is how Disneyfying it is. Everything about it really screams Disney but with Square Enix, because with the world's design, with the Square Enix characters designs, and what part of Square Enix did they actually use? Well, Final Fantasy. Square Enix was really much known for Final Fantasy, and so a lot of their Final Fantasy characters were present, as well as a newly designed character specifically for Kingdom Hearts. And that trio is Sora, Riku, and Kairi. They're the only original characters that Square Enix had created other than their own characters as well as Disney characters being part of the story. In that design that the creators of Kingdom Hearts had chosen is the Disneyfying. Initially, this is what it seemed like. Like Disney had full control and they had to use Disney aesthetics and Disney theme. And you can see that within the design of the main characters, Sora, Riku, and Kairi. They all look like Disney characters with the giant feet and the cartoonish look of them. However, their character progression is more like a Square Enix game. The story and the character progression of each of the characters feel that much more of a Final Fantasy title rather than being written by a Disney writer. And you can see that when they journey to the Disney worlds, the story in the Disney worlds feel a lot more impactful. Well, I shouldn't say impactful considering the actual movies were that impactful, but it's a lot more interesting to seeing non-Disney character being present in a story that involves Disney characters. For example, going to the jungle, Tarzan's world, and then seeing Sora fight the main villain in Tarzan. It's crazy, it's unique. But how does this all play? And where does it all start? It all starts at the very beginning. Destiny Islands. Well, the tutorial section.
PS
2 graphics. So much to do, so little time. Take your time. Don't be afraid. Now, I'm always confused on this section, right? The door is still shut. What is this? Now step forward. Can you do it? Now, with tutorials, I am very particular about them. To explain why I'm so particular about tutorials and the intricacies and fine details of tutorials, I would have to go in a separate video for that. However, the reason why I am so particular about tutorials is because they are important. They are important because games need tutorials to teach players how to play their game. Whenever you do something for the first time, you need to get a know-how. Without that, you're kind of confused throughout the entire experience, not even knowing you could do certain things. And so when a tutorial is presented to you, it's best to take it on in full force and dissect it to see whether or not what is good and what is bad. It's the same as how you're judging someone's teaching skills, whether they can effectively teach a group of students how to do a certain thing or not. This is why tutorials are super important. Now, what does this have to do with Kingdom Hearts' tutorial? Well, it's to explain in every game that from this point onwards that I go into, I will always focus on the tutorial. I will break it down and explain whether or not the tutorial works or does not work. For Kingdom Hearts, it is a very good tutorial. There are many aspects about the tutorial that is left to the wayside. It doesn't make much sense. However, it does a lot of things right. And that's starting with the very beginning of a tutorial, teaching the player how to move and jump. This is one of Kingdom Hearts' greatest strength. Kingdom Hearts' tutorial's greatest strength is that it doesn't give everything to the player all at once. And this is very important for a lot of reasons. When a player is given far too many things in the very beginning of a game, they are left with a stump. They have no idea what to do, what I can do and what I can't do. You are overwhelmed with a lot of things. And so what Kingdom Hearts does and does brilliantly is teach the player the very basics of a video game. How to move and how to jump. Your health, your MP, all of these basic things that is needed for the player to know, okay, this is that, this is this. I know how and what to do in the very beginning, in the very basics. And if the player understands the very basics, it is easier to teach the rest. And so, not only does Kingdom Hearts teach the basics, it lets the player also use the basics. The basics of movement and jump, which is from after being taught how to move and jump. Everything else is locked out, mind you. So you can't attack, you can't do anything else. You can only move and jump. How does Kingdom Hearts further teach the player is that right after you get taught this, you get put into a situation where you have to make a choice. And the way to make a choice is to move up to the pedestal and jump onto it. You need to move and then jump. So it gets the player comfortable with the movement. It makes them understand that this is how you move and how you jump. You are presented with 2 choices. The first choice is what you will use as your main weapon. And you're presented with 3 items: a sword, a wand, and a shield. The reason why you're presented with these 3 items is not for any story reasons. It's not for a choice-based reasoning. The story won't change, characters won't change, your character won't develop in a certain way. It doesn't really matter. What this matters is not for your story, not for your character. It is particularly for your leveling path. So whenever you level up, you'll get certain things: health, abilities, MP, and so on. The first choice you make determines what your leveling path will be. So what you will get whenever you level up. Would you get offensive abilities related to swords? Would you get offensive abilities related to magic? Would you get offensive abilities related to a shield? Or would you get defensive abilities? Would you get constantly magical abilities? Or would you get sword abilities? Basically what this all means. This is your first pick. This is going to be your primary way of attack. This is what this choice is. And to make this choice, you have to move and jump onto a pedestal to pick that item. You see how the game does this, how the game teaches the player and then makes them comfortable with that movement system by having them do something before ever learning how to attack. You have to make 2 choices, not just one. The next choice is to choose what's the next things you're gonna get midway level. You can't just be getting offensive abilities. You're gonna get every ability eventually, but what do you get next? First, you're gonna get abilities related to attack, and so what you get next is determined by your second choice. The question that they ask you is what you would like to throw away. Whatever you didn't throw away, you will get to keep. That's how this works. And so if you choose the sword at first, you would get offensive abilities related to the sword, and then if you throw away the shield, you would get magic abilities next, and then at the very end of your leveling path, which is now level 80 to 100, you would get shielded abilities. Before that, you would only get magic, and then before the magic, you would get your attack related abilities, your main attack related abilities. So these two choices determine your path. And so this beginning tutorial doesn't put too much on the player. It puts a little bit much on the player, making them choose their leveling path, but they don't really tell you that. You figure that out after playing the game multiple times, but you basically are asked, how would you like to play? Ending up with the two choices. After these two choices is when you finally get to the combat. Before this, you were only taught how to move and how to jump. This is what makes this tutorial so good. Once you understand how to move, jump, and you have a greater understanding of it after having done the choices section, you get put into the combat. Now, the combat in Kingdom Hearts is rather unique. It is one of its kind, you could say. The combat in this game became so popular that even in the latest Final Fantasy VII Remake, they used a branch of this type of combat style. Mind you, when Kingdom Hearts first came out, Square Enix, or Square particularly, was known for their turn-based strategy game. What does turn-based strategy mean for those who don't know? Turn-based strategy RPGs were basically, well, turn-based as the name suggests. You would have your turn. In your turn, you would get to choose what each of your party members could do, and then after your party members enact those commands that you've given your party members, the enemy does the same, and then they would attack you. So you can either prepare for your enemy's attack or attack them with all of your party members. That was how the old JRPGs used to do it. Some JRPGs still do it, or some JRPGs that are from RPG Maker also still do it. However, during this time, Square Enix was trying to branch out from that turn-based style, with Final Fantasy X having its unique combat style and Final Fantasy VII also having something different to turn-based style. It was no longer just turn-based. It was called the Action Battle Time Combat. The way this one worked was that instead of waiting for each other's turns, you would wait for your attack bar to fill up, and then once your attack bar fills up, you can command that character to do something. Essentially, it's the same way with turn-based, but instead of having to wait for your turn, you would just wait for your attack bar to fill up. And sometimes your attack bar will fill up faster than the enemy's attack bar. You can even cast a spell where the enemy's attack bar is slower and yours is faster, and so on and so forth. Same with Final Fantasy VIII, and then 10 came out with a entirely new style. However, Final Fantasy aside, Kingdom Hearts created a new system. They mixed the currently popular, or at the time popular, hack and slash real-time action battle system that every other game besides JRPGs were doing. They tried to implement this with their attack battle system. They wanted to have a bit of both, essentially, and that's what you get with this combat system. This combat system basically introduced a combination of real-time action combat and turn-based style action combat. The combination is very, very stark, and you can tell that it is stark because of the HUD menu. On the HUD, you have a command bar at the bottom left of your screen. This command bar has a list of actions or commands that you can give to Sora. However, Sora isn't standing still. Sora can be moved while you're switching commands or while you are choosing commands. It's why the system is a mix of both. The part that is the action battle system from Final Fantasy's games is the command bar, and the real-time action combat is you being able to move Sora in real time, because you still need to move Sora around to dodge different attacks or to move out of the way of enemies' attacks. At the moment, you don't have a dodge ability, but you eventually get one. I'll get into dodge and scan and whatnot. However, at this point in time, the tutorial finally teaches you how to fight, and so they explain the system. This is a mixture of both action battle system and real-time action battle system. The action battle system, as I said before, is that command bar. In the command bar, you have attack, magic, items, and finally either limit or summon. It changes depending on what you want. The real-time portion of this battle system is the fact that you can move around while selecting these commands. The command to attack while being able to move around. That's what makes it real time. However, it still has that action battle system that is also part of a turn-based system. It's combining the two together and seamlessly interweaving these two, making it a much more comfortable experience. Once you get used to the idea of it being a command and not just buttons you gotta press in a sequence of orders like every other real-time action battle game, then you would be able to easily grasp this control system. The game gives you enough time in this tutorial when it teaches you this mechanic. It gives you enough time to come to terms with that it is a combination of both. It's a combination of a real-time action battle system and a turn-based style action battle system, the one that's from the Final Fantasy games. It does this by right after teaching you your health, where your health is, where your MP is, the fact that you get experience for defeating enemies. It teaches you all these things. Right after that, it gives you a fight. It spawns some enemies for you and you fight these enemies while using the system. The only things you get access to, however, is just attack. The rest of the command bar is completely blacked out. You will only see it appear once you learn that it is possible to do certain things. For example, magic is blocked out until later in the game when you get the ability to use said magic. Otherwise, it's completely blocked out until that point, when they teach you that. Because the tutorial doesn't end here. After this portion, the tutorial does not end. It continues. So even till now, they keep things locked away from you until they teach it to you, allowing you to get a better grasp of the things that they're teaching you at the moment. It's how teachers teach classes. They don't teach you everything all at once and expect you to understand it. They teach you things in portions so that you're able to understand things. This is essentially what makes this tutorial very good. Not amazing, but very good. After you learn how to attack, they teach you the basics. They teach you how you're able to use items. Items are used to heal you, and so the item command is shown. Everything else is still blocked out. Only the item command is shown. It teaches you how to move objects. That is going to be important in the next tutorial section, so they teach it to you now so that you understand that objects can be moved if you push them. Objects in this type of shape can be moved if you push them, and how to save and whatnot. These are all great. This tutorial teaches you things in portions, as I said before. And because they're teaching you in portions, it's important for you to understand this thing at this moment. That's why it's such a great tutorial. After you get a basic understanding of the very basics of mechanics, you get placed into a boss fight. Straight into a boss fight. This is a very simple boss fight. It's not too difficult, it's not too easy at the same time. It's difficult enough so that you are tested on what you have just learned. This is the exam at this point. So you can see this tutorial is like a class. It teaches you the start. We are chapter 1, and then we go to chapter 5 in the textbook, and now we have a test. Do this test, pass the test, you have a good understanding of the controls, because this boss fight has you using everything in your arsenal that you've just learned. It has you using attack, it has you using jump and attack, it has you using your movement so that you're able to move around and away from the different enemies that are going to be spawning with this boss fight. It is a very easy boss fight, but it's also not too easy, it's not too difficult. This boss fight also has a story significance, so it doesn't put a random enemy there. It essentially represents, if I'm not mistaken, it represents the shadow of the character that you're playing. That giant big black thing is the shadow of Sora. You fight it later on before the entirety of Sora's world gets absorbed into darkness. After the first part of the tutorial ends, after you beat the boss fight, and now you wake up on a beach as Sora and meet the other two characters of this entire game. The other two original characters that Square Enix had created, Kairi and Riku, Sora's best friends. From this point onwards, you get into another tutorial. This game starts you out with 3 different tutorials. It doesn't look like it, but it's so seamless that you don't realize that you're doing 3 different tutorials. This second tutorial teaches you about the exploration within this game. In this area, we are at the Destiny Islands. On the Destiny Islands, you are given a task by Kairi to collect things around the island for their journey across the sea or something of the sort. It's not exactly clear what is really happening here, but that is what I picked up. And so we are on a mission to find things around the island as supplies. She gives you the list of what you need, and now you gotta go and find it. This is a tutorial. This game is testing your ability to explore. If you just run around the island and explore, you'll eventually find everything. Some things you would have to think on how to get it, but you're literally able to find every single thing eventually. The way these things are disguised are placed in places where you should be able to see it, or it is logical that it will be there. For example, the first set of items that you have to collect 2 sets of items in this second tutorial. The first set of items is 2 logs, 1 cloth, and 1 rope. These are very simple items. They are testing your ability to explore and eventually find these. You'll find them on the ground. It's not in a complicated spot. It's on the ground or somewhere around the island. They are basically asking you to explore the island. If you see it, you'll pick it up. Explore, talk to the locals and basically teaching you that this is how exploration will be in this game. The second set of items that you may have to collect is also supplies that consist of more complicated items. The first set of items were simple and are all on the ground, and you will eventually find them if you explore around the island. The second set of items, on the other hand, are a lot more complicated. It teaches you, okay, now you have to use your head. They are in logical spots. You just have to use your head and think for a second, where would these be? These items range from a fish to a seagull egg, and all of these are around the island. So you have to get 3 mushrooms, 2 fishes, a seagull egg, 2 coconuts, and drinking water. All of these are supplies that are in logical spots. For example, the 3 fishes. Where do you find 3 fishes? Think for a second before you say where you would probably find it. It's in the ocean, right? You're on an island, there's an ocean, run into the ocean and you'll eventually find fish. It was very simple. Okay, how do you get coconuts and a seagull egg? That's a bit confusing. How do I get coconuts? It must be somewhere on the island, it must be near a palm tree or whatnot. And you run around and you will not find it. This was me when I first played this game. When I first played this game, I was running around the island looking for these coconuts and the seagull egg. They were the most difficult to find. I had found all 3 of the mushrooms, but this particular seagull egg was extremely difficult to find, as well as the 3 coconuts. However, all you had to do, and this is what's brilliant about this tutorial and this game, is that you had to hit a coconut tree for the coconuts to fall. When I did that, I realized, oh yeah, that makes sense. You have to hit a coconut tree for coconuts to fall. That's so logical and it makes sense. And this is what they test you in this exploration. Can you figure this stuff out without any help? And yes, you can. If you pass it, if you get through it, and if you find these 3 coconuts, you will basically pass the test to the exploration tutorial. The seagull egg was the other thing that was also confusing. Where would the seagull egg be? Well, you just look up and you'll see it's on top of a palm tree. But how do I get on top of a palm tree? Do I gotta jump off another building and land onto the palm tree? Well, no, you just move up to the palm tree and realize that you can climb it and grab the seagull egg. I didn't know this until I sat and explored the entire area. When I played this for the 3rd time, going through that tutorial section for the 3rd time, I realized, wow, this is impressive. This is a game from 2002 and it's letting the player figure the things out without a little boy telling you what to do. I'm looking at you, God of War Ragnarok. Anyways, now with that tutorial out of the way, you get placed into another tutorial section, the last and final tutorial section before the game fully opens up to you. This is when you're in Traverse Town. Traverse Town doesn't seem like a tutorial or a prologue, but it technically is, because it is the titular beginner town in any RPG or JRPG for that matter. It's the beginner town. You can explore, you meet all these new people, you meet your vendors, you meet your vendors that sell you armor, you meet your upgrade stations. All of it is in Traverse Town. It's the beginner town. But the game doesn't immediately tell you exactly what to do. You basically are being tested again on what you have learned in the previous tutorial, the exploration. This is your exam. So now you have to explore and see where you are and what you have to do. The game doesn't really tell you where to go. You just have to keep moving forward and find around the area. You go around Traverse Town, see what is there, who do you talk to, how many people are there, what are they saying, and so on and so forth. As you explore, you eventually end up meeting the person that the other crew that we've been hearing about in the story, which is Donald and Goofy, who are looking for Mickey. I'll get into the story and what all of the significance of that is, but you finally, as Sora, meet the man you were supposed to meet here, that being Leon, one of the Final Fantasy characters. Final Fantasy 8 to be specific. Now this game came out around the time that Final Fantasy 10 had come out, so we saw a lot of Final Fantasy 10 characters in Destiny Island, like Titus. I only know Titus because I haven't actually played the entirety of Final Fantasy 10. I am going to. Then with Final Fantasy 7, I still have to finish that, but this is the start of meeting all of the Final Fantasy characters within Traverse Town. You even meet Sid, who is a mainstay throughout the entirety of Final Fantasy. After this meeting with these new characters, you get placed into one of the more unique bosses, but it's also your tutorial. This particular tutorial is about the party aspect. Now in this game, it's like every other JRPG. You still fight in a party even though you have a real-time action battle system at play. The party is not actually controlled by you. You don't get to control what the party does. You get to say what the party should do, but not direct control. You set a parameter for what the AI should do, and that's it. You don't get to directly control these characters. Never in any of the games do you get to control the party members you're playing with. At least not until Final Fantasy VII, where they improved on this, but I digress. This tutorial is a boss fight with party members. And so the boss fight is also, again, not too difficult, but it's unique enough for you to rack your head around. The boss is multiple parts. It's called the hollow armor. It's multiple parts: head, torso, arms, and 2 legs. Each part of the boss has its own health. So the torso has its own health, the legs have its own health, the head and arms have its own health. All of these body parts have its own health, but you can't really know that at the moment. You only realize this once you play it again, that when you fight this particular boss again later in the game, you realize that each one of these body parts have a health bar. The reason why I say that is because of the abilities system, and I'll explain the ability system in a minute. But you basically fight this big boss and defeat it. It is your first boss with your in the future longtime buddies Donald and Goofy. After this particular tutorial of party fight, we get introduced to the ability system as well as magic. So now the magic command bar is now there, and so we have 3 of our command bars before we get to the last one, which is either limit or a summon. We can only see that once we get a summon, and we'll get that to particular tutorial. However, we get introduced to the ability system. What is the ability system? Now, Kingdom Hearts is known for its ability system. At least I assume so. The ability system works in such a way where you would get a new ability every time you level up. Now, these abilities range from support, offense, and defense abilities. The offense abilities increase your attack percentage. So the amount of times you select the attack command, you get to upgrade that so that it can go for a 4-hit combo, a 5-hit combo, or a 6-hit combo, depending on what abilities you add. If you add a combo boost ability, which is one of the offensive abilities, it will constantly stack and add more combos to the attack command. Or you can add upgrades to your magic. So your magic could do more damage, you could do specific types of magic, and so on and so forth. Or you can combine magic with your attack commands. These are all within the abilities system. These are what the abilities system ranges from. But then you have the support abilities. Some of these are very, very strange because it ranges from, well, support to increasing your damage capacity, increasing your magic damage capacity, or increases your attacks, speed, or attack damage, to giving you movement abilities. Things that are very important. This is throughout the entirety of the Kingdom Hearts series, and it's very annoying. It only changes in the last couple of games, like Dream Drop Distance and Kingdom Hearts 3, where it is already equipped. Now, what do I mean by these movement abilities? An example, a very simple example, is Dodge. Dodge and Scan. These 2 abilities, Dodge, Roll, and Scan, are extremely, and I repeat, extremely important for the rest of the game. You need to know how much damage you're doing to a boss, especially in a JRPG, or especially in an RPG period. And a dodge is very helpful. The dodge isn't as important as Scan, but it is just as important for a movement game. You need to be able to dodge out of the way of attacks instead of just moving out of the way. The reason why Scan is a very bad move, placing it as a ability that you have to equip. It's not equipped by default. It's something you have to equip, taking up an AP point. AP points are basically the amount of abilities you can equip all at once. It's the same as a bar that fills up. It's the same as an XP bar or an HP bar. Depending on how many AP point slots you have, you can equip abilities onto that, depending on the cost. So one ability may cost 4 AP points, or one ability may cost 1 AP point, and you can equip it and it will decrease depending on the amount of abilities you add onto it. And because of that, Scan is now no longer a mandatory ability. It is optional, which shouldn't be the case in a game like an RPG or a JRPG, as I've mentioned, because you need to know how much damage you're doing, especially if you come to a boss too early and you don't know how much damage you're doing. You probably think you're doing a ton of damage, but in reality you're only doing a fraction of that damage. You won't know that you're not supposed to come here early and go and level up first. That's why in RPGs it's kind of important. Otherwise you have to lock out stronger areas before you send players in that direction. Now, for Kingdom Hearts, having to fight stronger enemies very early on in the game game is not possible, because when you reach a certain point in the game flips and you have to go through certain worlds again, but they are much more high leveled. There's more high leveled enemies there. There's even a world boss that you can fight. That's why it's fine, Kingdom Hearts, but it does help the player a little bit to have that scannability be there by default. The third game does this very well by having it equipped by default, and then everything else you can equip later on. That's how the ability system works in this game. You equip things. It's like armor or weapons. You equip it and unequip it. Since Kingdom Hearts is still a JRPG, you obviously have to have magic within that set of skills that you acquire through this tutorial. One of the things you do get right after the boss fight against the hollow armor, you are granted your first magic spell, fire. Now, once you're granted this magic spell, you are taught about how magic works in this game. It also works according to the same way that your attack and your items work. There is another command in your command bar that says magic. That you can scroll down to that command, click on it, and then choose which spell you want to cast. At first you only have a fire, but by the end of the game you have fire, lightning, water, gravity, shield, a whole host of different spells. But because this game is a real-time action game and not a turn-based style action game, you would have to forego some of your brain power as you're fighting to scroll down to the magic command and then scroll to select the right magic command, all while dodging the boss or the enemies you're fighting. You have to do this all at the same time, dodging the enemy's attacks as well as trying to find out the right command and choose the right spell and then aim it in the right direction and then cast that spell. So the game understands that this is a real-time action game and not a turn-based strategy game, so they give you another option, which is quick commands, and these only are for spells. They are only for spells and items, so you can quickly select an item by bumpers and one of the face buttons in combination. Then you would be able to use a quick command, as it's called. These quick commands shape up the combat a lot more. Now you have a lot of combinations with your regular attacks. You don't have to move away from the attack command. You can attack with your attack command and then dodge out of the way and use a spell by using one of the quick commands. This helps to sync yourself into the real-time action combat playstyle instead of thinking of it as a strategy and turn-based strategy game. This is what makes this game more of a real-time action combat game than a strategy game or a hack and slash for that matter. And the combinations of your attacks and your magic attacks while you're fighting and dodging enemies at the same time makes it a lot more of a hack and slash. Is why it's confused at times when you see gameplay videos, and it's confused that this game is actually a hack and slash and not a turn-based action battle system. As I have stated earlier, this tutorial teaches the player and provides the player with everything they need to know to overcome the upcoming highlights of the game. Now, the highlights of the game is obviously the boss fights. When you see videos of Kingdom Hearts online on YouTube, you always see ranking different boss fights, ranking the different Kingdom Hearts boss fights in Kingdom Hearts 1, the different Kingdom Hearts boss fights from Kingdom Hearts 2, or never really mention the handheld titles, but you know, we always mention the mainline titles. And every single one of these have unique boss fights. Kingdom Hearts 1 is no exception. Every single one of the boss fights that you get to fight are unique. Some of them are Disney villains, and some of them are Heartless boss fights. The Heartless boss fights are one of the most unique designed boss fights in the entire game. Starting with the very first one that you get to fight is the giant Heartless. That giant Heartless is actually, as we get to find out much later on, is Sora's shadow that we fight in his heart and we fight before he leaves the Destiny Islands. It's a unique boss fight in that in fact it's large and has a large hitbox. However, you can only hit his hands and head. Everywhere else you hit, it doesn't do any or that much damage. So even though he has a large proportion and a large body, you only can damage his head or hands, and for that reason the hands do a lot of attacks. So each of these boss fights have mechanics that keep you on your toes. However, one big elephant in Kingdom Hearts boss fight is that they are all button mash, because all you have to do is jump, come to the right spot, mash X over and over and over and over and over and over until you beat the fight. That's what it feels like when fighting Kingdom Hearts boss fights, and I would agree with you that is is true. However, Kingdom Hearts boss fights do have that button mashiness, but they also have mechanics to each of them. Each of the boss fights have mechanics just like the hollow armor. You have to attack each of the pieces of the armor set, and they all have their own health bar. After you attack and defeat pieces of the armor set, it will die, and then it will stop using its legs and start attacking you with its hand. It will do different attacks depending on which part of the body you get rid of first. If you get rid of the legs first, it will start doing spinning attacks at you. If you get rid of the arms first, it will start really coming at you with its legs. And once you get rid of both the arms and the legs, it starts using a giant cannonball from its chest, from its torso, to shoot cannonballs at you, which does a lot of damage. It changes up the more you fight. Each of these bosses have unique mechanics. Some of them are even very difficult. But the absolute highlights of Kingdom Hearts aren't just the bosses. You do fight a ton of bosses, some that are extremely unique and some that are so out there, and some that you completely forget that you even fought them. One of those biggest fights that you forget you fought them is much later in the game when you encounter the devil himself from Fantasia films. He's massive. He's one of the more difficult fights in the game. He's one of the last boss that you get to fight, one of the last Disney bosses that you get to fight, and his mechanics are extremely difficult. You're flying around him. Flying will be more explained once we get to the different worlds that we go to, but it's another movement mechanic. However, before we get to that, seeing that this boss fight had a very unique mechanic, you had to fly around him. The arena is a flying arena, and as you get closer to him, then you can attack him, but he has an attack that pushes you away, and if you're far away from him, he does homing fireballs at you. Each of these attacks are very difficult to dodge, and so you have to dodge the attacks, get up close to him, button mash, and then get away before he does that pushback blast, which pushes you back and damages you at the same time. So all of these bosses, they have something similar to this. It is button mashy, yes, but they have mechanics that keep you on your toes, mechanics that pushes you and makes you think before attacking, and makes you think about which position you have to be in so that you can attack. That's what makes these bosses more interesting and make them more difficult. That is until you fight some of the world bosses. Now, world bosses are a common trait throughout all of Square Enix's games, be it Final Fantasy, be it Kingdom Hearts, or any of the games that they've released that are JRPGs. They are always world bosses. These are bosses that you only tackle once you've reached the highest level in the game, you have all the abilities, you have the highest damaging weapon, then you tackle these bosses. And then you get rewards for tackling these bosses. One of these bosses is a titular Final Fantasy character, Sephiroth. Now, there are other world bosses like giant sand mechanical monster in Agrabah and the Phantom from Neverland. However, the most interesting one is Sephiroth. Those other bosses have mechanics that require you to move around the boss, get into the right position, wait for a specific time, and then button mash onto him. However, Sephiroth doesn't have that. There is no point in the fight where you get to just button mash on Sephiroth. You have to do a lot of dodging, blocking, get one or two hits in. Dodging, block is like you're fighting a Dark Souls fight, a Dark Souls boss fight, but a lot more difficult. He is extremely powerful that even if you are max level, which is 100, and you have all of your abilities, and you have all the abilities that are available to you, you have the most powerful weapon, he is still an absolute challenge. This is what makes the bosses very interesting, and it also brings back to the combat in this game and its ability system. Now, when you level up, you get stats, which is pretty good. You get upgraded stats. Your strength is upgraded, your health is upgraded, your MP is upgraded. Depending on what path you chose in the very beginning, you will get those upgrades. So if you chose your sword and you chose to throw away your shield, you would get strength and MP upgrades and HP upgrades. If you chose the shield and chose to throw away the sword, and you would get again MP, you would get strength, you would get a lot of HP, and you get a lot of MP, stuff like that. That's how the leveling system works. Now, this leveling system is very interesting because even if you reach level 100 and you get all the stats you need, you still won't be able to beat the world bosses. The reason why is because the strategy comes, or the mechanics come, in how you set your abilities. And not only that, once you set your abilities, it still takes skill to beat those bosses. Even with all your preparation, even with all your leveling up, it still takes a lot of skill, a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error, and figuring out the right ability combination that will really do the trick and will really set you in this boss fight. That's what makes this combat system very interesting, but also very flawed. The later parts of the game, the ability system works a lot better than it does in the early game, because in the early game you don't have a lot of ability points that you can equip so many abilities to your character, to Sora. But later down the line, you don't have to worry about ability points because you would have an abundance of, and you can equip as many abilities as you want, but you shouldn't, because sometimes you would have to remove abilities so that other abilities gel well meld together. That's what makes it such a very interesting combat system. It is very button mashy as well. The combat system is very button mashy, but because of the mechanics that go into each of the boss fights, that button mashy feel doesn't stick too long, especially with the very difficult boss fight. Now, for some boss fights, and I'm saying for some, there is that extreme problem. This mostly is a problem with a lot of the Disney villain boss fights. So I'm talking Maleficent, Ursula, Jafar, and a few of the other villains. They all have extremely button mashy boss fights, not with many unique mechanics, especially Maleficent Stage 1. In Maleficent Stage 1, when I first fought this boss fight, all I had to do was run up to her, jump onto a platform, and spam attack over and over and over and over until she died. That's all I did, and I finished that first stage. The second stage was a lot more complicated, however, it still had that same kind of feel. I just had to get into the right spot, jump when she's doing a AoE attack, and then continue spamming attack on it over and over and over again. When I'm doing so, when I'm damaged so much, I would summon Pixie, and then I would heal myself, heal my teammates, and then go back to button mashing over and over and over until she's dead. The same goes for Ursula. When in her first stage, it's a lot more complicated. There is a actual mechanic to it. She has a defense barrier around her. You can't attack her immediately, so you have to shoot magic at her bot so that her defense mechanism goes down, and so you can go in and spam your attacks at her, and then she would wake up again and repeat the same process while you're still getting attacked by her little minion. The second stage, on the other hand, is so much easier. All you have to do is get to a right spot next to Ursula's head and start button mashing, because she's large as well as has a massive hitbox, and so all you have to do is go to that small little corner next to her head and button mash over and over and over until you beat her. The same goes for Jafar. Jafar, the first stage was slightly complicated. All you had to do was get into the right position. There wasn't much mechanics besides getting into the right position. Once you get into the right position, you're set. You're easily able to defeat him. The second stage as well is the same thing. You just have to get into the right position. There wasn't anything else besides that, getting into the right position and button mashing your attacks. It's only when you come to the Square Enix created boss fights where the real mechanics start to set in. When you first fight Ansem, Riku Ansem, Ansem Stage 1, Ansem Stage 2, and when you reach the final version of Ansem, Ansem Stage 3, which is, again, that entire stage of boss fight was annoying to fight at first, but at the same time, it's very interesting. Each of the boss fights are really, really good in that aspect. Ansem Stage 2 was a very, very fun boss fight because it had you dodging all of his attacks, planning out your moves as you understood his attack pattern. He was basically a Dark Souls boss fight, which made me really excited when I was fighting Stage 2. Stage 3, on the other hand, is a lot of the same. The boss becomes large, and now you just gotta dodge the attacks, find the right position, and button mash on him. But it was a lot harder because he has a very strange hitbox. He's large, but there's only certain parts of him that you can actually damage. This is what makes the last boss fight also very fun to fight. It's the highlight of the game. The biggest highlight is the world bosses, but for main story, it is the last part of the game, the last couple of boss fights, including Riku Ansem, which was a really tough fight and one that you had to really pay attention to all of his moves. This is what makes the combat system and the bosses really, really well done in Kingdom Hearts 1. Once you get acquainted with the combat system and the control system in Kingdom Hearts, the next thing would be is to explore the different worlds that the game has to offer. And Kingdom Hearts has a lot to offer when it comes to exploration. We all know what Blazers is, come on.
Oh, my fur whiskers! I'm late! Oh dear! I'm here! I should be there! Oh, I'm late! Oh, the Queen! She'll have my head for sure!
Now, earlier in the video, I had explained the exploration tutorial that was done at the Destiny Islands. It's one of the first worlds you get to see in Kingdom Hearts, is the Destiny Islands. It's called that for many reasons, story-wise, theme-wise. It all makes sense when you come back to this point after playing the third game. What the meaning of the name of the first world that you get to go to is the Destiny Islands. So, as it's the first world, they teach you how to explore said world. There are two segregated zones in that particular world, which is where the raft is and the little race minigame was, as well as where the rest of the characters from the Final Fantasy genre were. These two segregated zones indicate that, well, the next couple of worlds that we get to go to will also have that implemented. All the worlds that we eventually go and visit, which is Traverse Town, Olympus Coliseum, Wonderland, The Jungle, Agrabah, Halloween Town, Atlantica, Neverland, Hollow Bastion, and at World's End. All of these worlds that we get to visit or we go and explore have these segregated zones. They are separated in segregated zones. You don't get to explore it from one zone to the other and just move without a loading screen. These are separated, by the way, by a loading screen. So you'd reach the end of that zone and then enter another zone, and then you reach the end of that zone and enter another zone. That's how it works. And all of these zones are separated by a loading screen. But in these zones, there are secrets. There's loads of treasure chests. There's loads of secrets you get to find. When this game came out, it was in the era of, well, we will hide all the secrets within the game, and there will be an abundance of different secrets, cool shit that you get to find around the different worlds. This is in that era. They didn't used to sell the secrets to you. They would let you find them within the game instead of you having to buy those secrets on the side. With the abundance of secrets within Kingdom Hearts 1, and Kingdom Hearts 1 specifically because they have way more secrets than the entire of the franchise combined, exploring each of the worlds is semi-crucial because you would miss out on a lot of stuff that you could be finding within these worlds. Hell, finding some of the world bosses is also a secret. Yes, at the turning point of the game, when you start going into the end game, a lot of the world's battle level, which is how each of these worlds are leveled, so the battle level indicates how strong the Heartless are within that world. Some world's battle level will reach a higher star, and that indicates that there's something there that needs to be discovered and defeated. And so these are some of the world bosses. If you defeat these world bosses, you would complete these worlds and then get a secret ending, which indicates what may come next. And this was only done for the final mix versions. All of these worlds are having loads of secrets make exploration fun. It's really fun to explore when there's something to find. In every single one of these worlds, they are small, yes, but they're uniquely designed as well. They're very, very, very small. There's not a lot of room to move around. Like exploring in Agrabah is going from the market to the palace to the Wonder Cave, and each of these places are all separated from each other, but they all have their own little secrets within them, and exploring them is very small, very minute. They're not big enough to run around and find more secrets. You would eventually find every single one of these secrets since all of these worlds are small, but it doesn't make it less fun to explore these little worlds, pockets of these worlds that are from these Disney films. Later games expand on this. They would have much bigger worlds, and you don't have loading screens in between each section. You can run from one section of the world all the way to the other section of the world. That was in Kingdom Hearts 3 or in Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. Those games introduced a much bigger environment to explore from these Disney worlds. You get to see parts of the world that are not shown in the films. It's great to see where they got from where they started. This is where they started with these small worlds, and it's due to the limitations of the console, but all these worlds are really fun to explore because of all these secrets to find. Hell, even in Neverland at the Big Ben section, on top of it, there's a bunch of doors there that you can't really open at the moment. You can only open those doors when you find certain secrets in the universe of Kingdom Hearts, and then come back to Neverland and then open one of these doors, and each of these doors hold a different secret, different items or things that you can find. I didn't know this was the case until looking up on YouTube. Most people didn't know it's this case because it's a very hidden secret within Kingdom Hearts, and that's what makes exploration fun in this game, and in all the Kingdom Hearts games for that matter, is that the fact that they have all of these secrets lying in these very small pocket worlds. Each of these worlds are well designed. Halloween Town is a great example, as it's from a Tim Burton film that with a unique claymation design, and they translate that very well into the game, having even Sora and his crew change outfits when arriving in this world, and then exploring Halloween Town that you only got to see in the film. That's one of the beauties of going around in Kingdom Hearts, is exploring some of these worlds that only existed within the film. Even the original created worlds that Square Enix had created for this game particularly are also fun to explore. Hollow Bastion is a great example of a decrepit world that was once vibrant. In the soundtrack as well as the world design all translate into a great exploring experience. Though there are some caveats to this exploration, but that mostly has to do to the fact that the console is very limited in what it can do. A lot of these worlds feel dead. There's only you, Sora, whoever the main character of that film was, are exploring these worlds. They are the only ones that are actually running around in these worlds. There's no other NPCs. There is only the design that you get to look at, but a lot of the worlds feel dead. You get to see the NPCs in specific locations, and they're only in those specific locations. So when exploring the worlds, you end up feeling a bit alone, because all of the worlds feel empty. They don't feel entirely empty because of the monsters you have to fight. Every time you leave a certain area, and when an area of fighting is happening, you would have to go and fight those monsters. That's why I say sometimes the worlds feel dead, because there's nothing besides monsters that you're fighting. But otherwise, the worlds are well designed, and it's also just the start. We have so many more games to go through which have much more bigger and more beautiful worlds that you get to look at. Some of the same worlds that are in Kingdom Hearts 1 are far upgraded in later games. Kingdom Hearts 2 already does a lot more when it comes to exploration, though the next game on the list, Chain of Memories, does not, and we'll get to that one when we do.
Well, what are you talking about?
Huh?
Tied to the darkness, soon to be completely eclipsed.
Well, whoever you are, stop freaking me out like this. Huh? Well, where did you come from?
You do not yet know what lies beyond the door.
So you're from another world.
There is so very much to learn. You understand so little.
Oh yeah? Well, you'll see. I'm gonna get out and learn what's out there.
A meaningless effort. One who knows nothing can understand nothing.
The entirety of the Kingdom Hearts story, thus including every single game, is touted as being one of the more complicated video game stories. It's up there with Metal Gear Solid and Nier Automata, with its themes and its plot meshing together and making it overcomplicated or convoluted, as some would say. I, on the other hand, don't think it's that complicated. All of what they explaining, I take at face value before I think of the themes. That way I can see whether or not all of this lines up or makes sense. And the Kingdom Hearts story does make sense. Not entirely, there are parts that doesn't make in complete sense, but the story itself as a whole can be made sense out of. And starting with the very first game and the story that it tells. The story it tells is already midway through the entire world of Kingdom Hearts' story. It's midway through. The very start of Kingdom Hearts goes all the way back to Birth by Sleep. Birth by Sleep is the earliest point in the timeline. Yes, Kingdom Hearts X Cover and that online game that they released somewhere in between Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 is the earliest point in the timeline. However, that game is down at the moment. There is no way to play it. The servers have been shut down for a very long time, so there's no way to really experience that game's story. So the earliest point in the timeline truly is Birth by Sleep. But you can't really play or understand Birth by Sleep story if you start the story from Birth by Sleep. You have to start it with Kingdom Hearts 1, where the mystery began. It wasn't a mystery until the very end of the game. The entire game's plot is very simple to understand. This boy, Sora, is chosen by the Keyblade to become a Keyblade wielder. Originally, his friend Riku was supposed to be the Keyblade wielder, but because he had accepted the darkness and had fallen into darkness, the Keyblade went for the next best person, Sora. That's why Sora becomes the Keyblade wielder, the one who holds the key. This boy gets a very important mission, is to close the doors of darkness and to bring back all the worlds that had fallen into darkness. Now, darkness and light is a very complicated topic to talk about in particularly Kingdom Hearts 1. It's a lot more explained in the later games. In the handheld titles especially is where they go into more depth, explaining light and dark. Now, the main plot is about this boy, Sora, after having acquired the Keyblade. He sets out on a journey to find his friends and to close the doors of darkness in the different Disney worlds that we visit. In each world, he would close the door of darkness and he would strip the villains of darkness as he closes the door of darkness. But it doesn't just end there. The plot seems to go in a direction where everything would make sense of a journey. He goes through the hero's journey in this first game, all the way until we reach the Kingdom Hearts original world, Hollow Bastion, where Maleficent is residing. That seems to have been the conclusion of his hero's journey, but it is not. It is just the start. Because right after that, he goes on another mission to save his friend, where we fight the true villain of this game, Ansem. Now, before we go too further ahead, let's dial it back a bit to really start from the very beginning. Destiny Islands. As I explained, Destiny Islands is the first world that you get to explore as Sora. It's your tutorial world. And in the tutorial world, you meet the titular main characters, Sora, Riku, and Kairi. Sora is the character that you play as. Riku and Kairi are Sora's Sora's goals. They are his closest friends, and so when the world gets absorbed into darkness, he sets out to find these friends of his because he believes that they haven't been absorbed into darkness as well. On his journey to find his friends, Riku and Kairi, who aren't really main characters in this game, later games, their story is more fleshed out. Their characters are more fleshed out. For the first game particularly, Sora's character is very much fleshed out because as you progress throughout the entire game, you sort of see what type of character he is. He's a very kind-hearted child that would help when he sees someone in need of help. That's his main characteristic, you could say. However, Sora's journey doesn't begin until he arrives in Traverse Town and meets the titular Final Fantasy characters, Leon, Aerith, and Tifa. They fully explain what Sora's job is and all this that is happening. They explain, not in great detail, but they explain what he's been fighting and what he has in his hand, a Keyblade. Sora has been chosen by the Keyblade that we already established. The creatures that he's been fighting is called the Heartless. They exist due to the darkness absorbing hearts, or when a heart is separated from its body. There are two beings are created, the Nobodies from Kingdom Hearts 2 and the Heartless, when someone's heart is separated from their body. That's how they explain it. It's very complicated. It doesn't click immediately, but when you come to the later games, it sort of does. I don't know, it clicked in my head, but it's difficult to explain, but that's basically what they're explaining. What the Keyblade does is reconnect your heart and your body. It also disconnects. It does both. It can reconnect and disconnect. It's what disconnects one's heart from their body and creates Heartless. If that's the case, does the darkness actually separate the heart from the body and create Heartless? Or is there someone actually separating the heart from the body of people? I don't know which is which. Those that get absorbed into darkness, they get turned into Heartless? These are all the questions I had when I came into the first game. It didn't make much sense at first, but it does eventually make sense when they start explaining other stuff in the second game. But with that understanding, Sora sets out on this journey with his titular companions throughout the entire series, Donald and Goofy. They also have their own character and motivations. Their goal is to find their king. The king had disappeared, their king being Mickey Mouse. Ahoy.
Now, Sora, let's close this door for good.
That character, he is the king of Disneyland. And so Donald and Goofy, Donald is his head mage and Goofy is his head of security. And those two had found out that the king had disappeared and the king had actually sent a letter to them to find the key and they're to go and find Leon, which is all in Traverse Town. They find the key, which is Sora, and they found Leon. That's what the journey that the king set those two characters on. So they join you on the journey to find the king. They help you, but their goal is to find the king and your goal is to find your friend. So this conflict between the two goals do come into play in a much later world. But the first couple of worlds they go to is Alice in Wonderland and Hercules. Those two Disney worlds that you go to don't have much to them at the moment. They basically play out the exact same story that was in the film. The characters that you play as, Donald, Goofy, and Sora, nothing is progressed with their character. The story is progressed. They came to this world and found out that they have to close the door of darkness, which is the keyholes in those worlds. The keyholes in those worlds are the doors of darkness. They have to close them. And so you figure this out. And those points in the game and those points in the story of those worlds are when the main overall plot comes into play. Otherwise, we're following the exact same plot of the films that these are based off of. It only starts to change once you arrive in the jungle. When you arrive at the jungle, Donald doesn't want to land because the king would never be in a jungle, and Sora wants to land because he wants to find his friend. And so they two conflict against each other, grabbing the wheel, and they eventually crash land into the jungle. It's the first time you split up from Donald and Goofy, and you team up with the other inhabitant, the main character within that world, Tarzan, to help you through the different Heartless that you fight. Tarzan's story obviously plays out as it is in the film, but with the addition of Sora, Donald, and Goofy all being there. And even fighting Clayton is a very unique boss fight because he's riding an invisible creature in the very beginning. And so as you attack him flying in the sky, it looks like he's flying. But when you attack him, the full creature shows. It's like a chameleon that he's sitting on. That's basically how the story goes. By the end of that, they make up and then move on to the next world. And that world has its own little story that doesn't really correlate with the main story. It only starts to correlate with the main story and the main goal of each of the characters once you reach Neverland. Neverland is where the story really kicks off again. When Sora finally meets Riku one more time, for the third time. He meets him when he goes to Monstro, and then he's a bit confused at what he's doing at Monstro and why is he taking Pinocchio. And then he also met him one more time in Traverse Town before he left for the second time to go on to the other worlds past the War Point. After those two meetings, each time he met Riku, Maleficent infects his mind that Sora is trying to betray him or get new friends. This is what the journey journey Riku goes through. We don't actually get to see this in its entirety until we get to Chain of Memories. But before we get to Chain of Memories, the story still has to play out. Riku gets constantly jealous of Sora, his new friends, him being the Keyblade wielder, so on and so forth. He at least wants to save Kairi, and so he does what Maleficent wants so that he can save Kairi, because Kairi is missing her heart. We find this out once we reach Neverland. Once we reach Neverland, we meet both Kairi and Riku. Kairi currently doesn't have a heart. She is a heartless girl, you could say. Where's her heart? What happened to it? We got a hint of it in the beginning of the game, but we don't actually know where it is at this point. But Sora finds out that Riku is up to no good and he's accepted the darkness, whereas Kairi is unconscious. And so he sets out on the journey to go and save Kairi, since Riku had taken Kairi back to Hollow Bastion. This is when from Neverland you go to Hollow Bastion, the final world, as I thought it was when I reached Hollow Bastion, because everything seemed to be coming to a climax. Riku and Sora meet each other before he enters the castle of Hollow Bastion. However, this is when the conflict of Sora's character comes into play. As I said earlier, originally Riku was supposed to be the Keyblade wielder. Sora became the Keyblade wielder because he was the second choice. And so because Riku was originally supposed to be the Keyblade wielder, he took the Keyblade from Sora and all its powers. And because he took it away, Donald and Goofy has to follow the one with the key. That was their mission from Mickey. And so they left Sora all by himself. This is the lowest point in Sora's journey. It's called the lowest point in the hero's journey, you could say. But he doesn't really give up. He was about to give up when he saw Beast walking in to save Belle. His motivation had come back to him, and his drive to save his friend came back to him. And so he walked into the castle of Hollow Bastion without a Keyblade and without any way to fight. And this is the point in the game which is really cool, where you don't have your main weapons and you have to completely change up how you fight. The only way to really fight is using Beast. Beast is the only one that can fight for you, so you kind of have to stay in the back and watch Beast do his work. And you are without a Keyblade for a very long time, helping Beast go through the castle. You and Beast going through very powerful Heartless. Beast is taking them out for you, and you just walking behind them. After you go through this arduous journey through the beginning of Hollow Bastion, you reach the main hall. In that hall, you confront Riku again, but this time you're without a Keyblade. Riku has your Keyblade, and you don't have any way to fight Riku. You only have a wooden sword that does nothing. You didn't have any weapon to fight against the darkness either. You could only use Beast. And so at this point, Sora, his main resolve and his main source of power comes at this point.
You're wrong, Riku. The darkness may destroy my body, but it can't touch my heart. My heart will stay with my friends. It'll never die.
At this point in the game, in the first game, it sets the stone, or it sets the bar for where Sora gets his power from. It's very much fairy tale like. If you ever seen fairy tale, you would know what I'm talking about. He gets his power from his friend. My friends are my power is one of his main lines throughout the entirety of the series. You will see it be brought up time and time again. This is where it starts, because he had no companions and he was trying to fight against Riku to get back his Keyblade, but he couldn't. And so when Riku had attacked him, Goofy came in to save him. And this is really great characterization for the start. We get to see that Donald and Goofy aren't just following their mission. They really did become friends with Sora throughout their journey together. And this is where it's completely confirmed that Sora, Donald, and Goofy had really solidified their friendship. And so both Donald and Goofy protected Sora while he didn't have the Keyblade. And because of this, the Keyblade had switched back to Sora, and Riku had lost the use of the Keyblade because he had fallen further and further into darkness. Sora, on the other hand, had fallen further and further into light, and that's why the Keyblade switched back to him. But because of this, Riku's jealousy and anger towards Sora grew even larger, to the point where someone unknown to us just at this point came and offered him power. We get to find out who this was eventually, but at this point we have no clue. So Sora leaves Riku behind and goes to save Kairi. On his way to save Kairi, he battles Maleficent and defeats Maleficent. At this point you think, great, the game's over. This is where the story concludes. We defeated the main villain, and we hear a resounding no. Because the game doesn't really end here. There is one more villain that shows up. Riku. Or at least not Riku. Sora immediately noticed that Riku doesn't seem like himself. He seemed like an entirely different person. This person is the one who offered Riku power. He had taken control over Riku's body entirely, absorbing him into darkness, giving him even a keyblade to use, a dark keyblade. That's why this boss fight becomes a really interesting one. Sora is trying to save his friend and get this person who's taken control of Riku's body out of Riku. And so a fight ensues between Riku and Sora. Riku explains something that I have yet to give information about. He explains that Kairi is a princess of a world that already existed, that had been absorbed into darkness. It's why she doesn't have a heart and why the villains wanted her. Now, why do the villains want her? Because she's a princess. But for what reason, right? Now, Maleficent's main goal was to open up the doors to the darkness realm, the realm of darkness. That main door to that realm. She wanted to open that up, but to do so, she would have to get 7 light or 7 key. And so she needed to get 7 hearts of light, meaning 7 princesses. The 7 Disney princesses: Jasmine, Belle, Cinderella, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, Kairi, and one other. All of these princesses would come together and be used as a key to open up the doors to the realm of darkness. This was her goal because she was given this goal by someone else or manipulated into this goal by someone else. And so that person is the one who took control over Riku's body. He explains he needs her heart, but she doesn't have it. Kairi had sealed her heart somewhere before she was taken by Maleficent, or absorbed into darkness and taken by Maleficent. She then, before she was taken, she placed her heart and sealed it within Sora's. That's why early in the game, when Sora goes to find Kairi after he loses Riku, he went to go and find Kairi in the cave where the two of them had a memory together. In that cave, Kairi was standing there, looking all dead and gloomy. But as she flew towards Sora, she disappeared and was absorbed into him. This was a sign of her sealing her heart within Sora's, to keep it away from the villains that wanted her heart, so they can never fully complete the key to the door of darkness. And so they needed Sora to make his way all the way to Hollow Bastion, because they knew where it was all along. And we even get more hints of this later in the game when she contacts Sora within his mind, speaks to him, essentially. This is foreshadowing other events to come later on, for other characters we get to meet later on. It also explains a lot of what happens in Kingdom Hearts 3. However, after he gives this long monologue and explains that Kairi is a princess and where her heart really is, he goes into a battle with Sora, this non-Riku person. This battle is one of my favorite boss fights in the game. It's my second favorite boss fight in the game. Ansem 2 is my favorite, but my second favorite boss fight in the game because of the moveset that he uses against you. Because of that unique moveset he uses against you, it makes it one of the second greatest boss fights in the entire game. You have to sort of move your way around the battlefield. He does major AoE attacks. He does a fast sword dash attack throughout the entire arena. It's very bombastic and very large. It makes it such a great fight. But once you beat him, he completely disappears, and we have to forget about him for the time being because Kairi still needs our heart. And so Sora does a unique move here. He separates his own heart and whoever's heart was in him from his body. He actively unseparates it using the key of darkness, the keyblade of darkness, the one that non-Riku was using to fight against Sora. He did this so he could save Kairi. In doing so, he completely turns himself into a darkness. And at this point, Kairi wakes up and sees what Sora is doing, what Sora has done, and where he is. He's completely disappeared. However, something interesting happens. The player gets switched to the perspective of a little darkness creature, a heartless creature, a small one that you get to control and run around in. We get to find out that this is Sora that we're playing as. He's in his darkness form. And so when he hears that Kairi, Donald, and Goofy are struggling to fight against some enemies, he makes his way all the way to them in darkness form and then steps in before Kairi dies. As I mentioned earlier, Kairi is Sora's light in the darkness. And so he followed that light. His heart had followed that light. And then from a heartless, he was able to bring back his own body, which is something unheard of because he followed his light, Kairi. After this happens, he comes back into form. Everyone is confused because this has never happened before. This is an unprecedented situation because something else is happening elsewhere, which we get to find out later, but something else is happening elsewhere. When he gets back to his body, that other thing, something happens there that shuts this other person down. I'll get to that person when we get to it, but that's what happened. He gets his body back, and then all 5 of them make their way back to Traverse Town to report on what had happened. In Traverse Town, they meet up again with Leon, Aerith, and Tifa to discuss what had happened and report on the situation. But I thought the the game had ended, right? At that point, I thought the game had ended once you had defeated Maleficent and Riku. But Riku is still out there. He's not completely dead. He hadn't killed him. And so he has to find Riku. He has to find and save his friend Riku. And so this is his next mission, to save Riku. While in Traverse Town, he has a conversation with Kairi. Kairi and him have a very intimate conversation, and that he is going to go out of his way to find where Riku is. He has to go back to Hollow Bastion because there's a clue there to finding out where Riku might be. He has to go into the end of the world where the darkness starts from, and he has to go there. So he has to go back to Hollow Bastion to find that clue. And so before he leaves on his journey to go back to Hollow Bastion, he has a conversation with Kairi. The conversation they have together is a very significant one for later games. Kairi gives him something, a lucky charm, so that he may find her once more. It's a wayfinder, as she calls this lucky charm. She wants to go with him, but she can't really help, and so he stays behind, but he must make his way back. And so he accepts this gift and goes and sets out to find his friend. This isn't the end of the game, but the turning point in the game. When you reach end game. How it is in an RPG where you reach the end point, but this is not the end point, this is end game. So all the worlds that you were at previously, there are new creatures that have popped up, and each of the difficulty of those worlds has shot up entirely. So when you go to those worlds again, you'll be fighting much stronger Heartless. Some of the worlds had spawned in a world boss like Agrabah, Neverland, and the Colosseum, which spawned multiple world bosses, which you get to fight in a very, very long tournament. But the main mission actively starts once you reach Hollow Bastion again. You go to Hollow Bastion to figure out what has happened, and from there, once you're in Hollow Bastion, you meet up with the crew that was in Traverse Town. They explain that Hollow Bastion used to be their childhood home. They came there on Cid's ship, and that all they have to do is defeat Ansem, the main villain that is taking control of Riku's body, not Riku. Yeah, all you have to do is defeat him at the end of the world, and all of the islands from the realm of darkness would be restored. And so that's the goal here, going through to Hollow Bastion and restoring everything. Going to the end of the world and restoring everything after defeating Ansem. And that's basically the goal we set out. Everyone at Hollow Bastion says their goodbyes because after you defeat Ansem, all the walls will be restored, but then you won't be able to see each other ever again because there would be impassable walls in between different worlds. You can't go to different worlds. You have to have a specific ship, or you have to have specific magic that takes you to these different worlds. Otherwise, you can't get to them. And so that's why they said this is goodbye. Then you say your goodbyes to everyone before heading off to the end of the world. Once you go to the end of the world, you come to a world that is full of darkness. It's one of the scariest places in Kingdom Hearts. You go through an onslaught of enemies and bosses. You fight against the devil himself, one of the more unique bosses, as I have explained before. After you defeat him, you go further into another onslaught of enemies, which the end of the world keeps changing the further you go into, all the way until you reach a scuffed up Destiny Island. This is the final boss, the start of the final boss fight against Ansem, and we get to see his true form. This true form of his is a unique one. He looks like a JoJo character, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure character with a stand behind him. It's literally that. He doesn't fight physically with you, with his hands or whatnot, or with magic. He fights with his stand. So a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure character without the poses. After you fight his first stage, he runs into the center of the Destiny Islands where you have to go and fight him. But only Sora can proceed. You can't go with Donald and Goofy. So you're on your own. And this is my favorite part of the boss fight. I really was frustrated as I played through this, but it's one of my favorite sections of this boss fight because you get to fight two boss fights. You first fight the very first giant Heartless that you fight in the very beginning of the game. Two boss fights you fight in the very beginning of the game, and you get to fight Ansem's second phase where he's a lot more aggressive, but also it's a one-on-one battle. He's around the same height as you, so you have to dodge all of his attacks, and it's really fun learning all of his attacks. The only annoying part is that you have to fight a boss fight before you fight him, and that's the only annoying part. You don't fight him directly, you have to do a fight first and then fight him. If there wasn't that first fight and it was just him, it would be a whole lot better. But it was really fun learning all of Ansem's moves. His very dangerous move that he does where he grabs onto you, you have to dodge that attack. You can't get hit by that because if you do, you get damage over time, and he damage over time all the way until you lose all your health. That one attack where he grabs you is the only attack that kept killing me. I could dodge every single one of his attacks. That was the one attack that I could not dodge. I eventually figured out how to dodge it and finally beat him. Once you beat him, you have to keep going. There's no stop here, let me save, and then go out and do a bit of grinding and then come back. No, there's none of that. You have to immediately start the fight. There is no waiting. There's no, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna save and then go and grind and then come back to this fight. No, you gotta go straight to the third phase. And the third phase is a lot more difficult. And as I explained earlier, he's a bigger form, but he has a very small hitbox. You have to be very precise with that hitbox. But that hitbox, when you start hitting him, he does an attack that pushes you away and does damage to you. But when you are further away from him, he does an attack that shoots lasers at you that track you. It's laser tracking. It shoots lasers at you that does damage to you, very high damage, but it also tracks you, and so you have to dodge that. It's very, very difficult because you, number one, are alone, and there isn't cannon fodder that can take the damage for you and distract the enemy while you wail on him over and over. After the first stage of that boss fight, this final big boss fight also has 3 stages of its own. There's the first one where you fight against him. If you defeat him, you go through another phase where you have one of your teammates, and then you go through another phase where you have both of your teammates. Those are easier than the first one, and then you finally defeat Ansem. His goal really was to open up the door to darkness, where not just to open up the door to darkness, but to get to the darkness realm and open up the door to Kingdom Heart. That is his main goal. He wants to get to that, opening up the door to Kingdom Hearts that has been sealed in the realm of darkness. But he was very close to opening it up, and when he did, light hit him and completely erased him, since he was a heartless. He fought for what he wanted, but got what he did not want. And so the door of darkness is now open. But earlier, while we were on Traverse Town, Riku, the real Riku, was stuck inside his own body, inside the realm of darkness. His heart was stuck inside the realm of darkness. The reason for that is because his entire body was taken over by Ansem, and so his heart had fallen into the realm of darkness. While he was there, he was trying to get back to his body because he had a change of heart. His mind was corrupted by Maleficent and Ansem, and so it built onto that. Now, while he was in the realm of darkness, the good side of Riku was coming to his senses and was trying to get back to his body to save his friends Sora and Kairi. While he was trying to get back, he couldn't get back to his body, and a voice told him his body, it's too late for his body. And while we get to see this really nice cutscene, and we find out that this cutscene is in the realm of darkness, and the one who was telling him this was King Mickey himself. King Mickey was in the realm of darkness already, searching for the other Keyblade, the Keyblade on the other side, because the only way to close the door of darkness is to lock it from both sides, the key of light and the key of darkness that Mickey had. He had found the key of darkness, and Sora had found the key of light, so they had to close it from both sides. While Riku and King Mickey were closing the door to darkness, they got stuck on the other side, so they sacrificed themselves for Sora, Donald, and Goofy. As they were closing it, Sora, Donald, and Goofy didn't make their way back to Destiny Islands, even though all of it had been restored. They had decided to go on the journey to find King Mickey and Riku, because they could still be alive. That is the end of Kingdom Hearts 1 and leads into the very next game, Chain of Memories. The entirety of this game, as long as it is and as complicated as the story is with the different elements that take place, it's a very interesting and great start to the Kingdom Hearts lore. The story only starts getting more and more interesting once you reach Chain of Memories. That's when the game really kicks off. It's one of the more interesting points of Kingdom Hearts. It's Chain of Memories, the story of Chain of Memories. The gameplay, on the other hand, is a big topic that I will very much well get into once we go into Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories.
Holy shit. Where they are?
Now what do we do?
Good question, Donald.
We've got to find Riku and King Mickey.
But, where do we start looking for that there door to the light?
Good question.
Huh?
I don't know why, it feels so strange.
Pluto?
Another
Hey,
letter?
Pluto! Where have you been?
Good question.
Huh?
Hi!
Gosh, that's the king's seal!
Hey, have you seen King Mickey?
Yep.
Guys, let's go.
Okay. Nice. Okay. So where are they?
Yep.
Kingdom Hearts 1 is one of those games when you first play it for the first time. It is an experience of the past. It's a PlayStation 2 game. It has that feel of a PlayStation 2 game, but it has a lot more heart to it. Compared to the later games, Kingdom Hearts 3, for example, is my second favorite, of course. This is my third. But the first game has that childlike feeling to it. There's not a lot of seriousness in the overall theme and aspects of the game. There's a childlike feel to the journey as well. The worlds that you're going to are all Disney worlds. If you've seen the movies, you know what you're getting into. You know what story you're going through. It's a heartfelt, childlike family story. And this is the same for the game. It still, however, holds on to that Final Fantasy aspect. It's also very sluggish, slow, and constricted. The first game is like that. It feels sluggish, slow, and constricted. You're not able to move enough in the game. There's a lot of points where I was getting really annoyed at the controls itself. Let me move freely, move the camera out further, let me move throughout the boss fights, let me dodge properly. It wasn't smooth, and it's understandable because this is the first attempt at this. The game is more refined with each entry into the series. They refine it more and more, and by the time you reach the third game, it is ultra refined. And that's why I say it does feel like it's a product of its time. Not a bad product of its time. It's a really good product of its time. It has everything you need in the game, and it is a very long PlayStation 2 game. Obviously, the Persona games are so much longer, but still, it was great for what it is. It has a great story, great characters. It had everything to be a stepping stone for a much larger world to come. And that's why the first game, I give it really high praise. It does everything right, and a few things it improves on. It's starting out. It has a lot of great ideas and great potential. It'll eventually reach the point where it will reach its heights, the heights of Final Fantasy and the heights of great JRPG games. But it doesn't rank as high as I would rank its later entries. It ranks 4th amongst all of the entries in the game, in the series. Each series, as I talk about them and break them down, I will give them a rating and a rank in the entire series. There are overall 9 games that you can play. Some of them in the collection you don't actually play, you just watch. In total there's supposed to be 10, but there is in total only 9 games, 1 extra level. And out of all of those 9 games, the first game ranks 3rd in my book, and I give it a 7.5 out of 10 because it really does a lot to start out the series. It does a lot to set it apart from other JRPGs, number 1, and also to set it on a path to becoming a very massive story and a very massive world that you get to explore. When I first played Kingdom Hearts and I started with this first one, I didn't expect that it would become one of my favorite series. I would become an absolute fan of the series. And the first game really hits you. There's something about it, the music, the characters, the story, the gameplay. All of this combined makes a great Kingdom Hearts sandwich. Anyways, this is the first game, Kingdom Hearts 1. Next time we're going to be tackling Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, a Game Boy Advance and PlayStation 2 game, remade onto the PlayStation 2. A very divisive game. Some people really like it. I absolutely despise it. I only despise the gameplay. The story is amazing, but we'll get into the reasons why next time on the Kingdom Hearts Retrospective series. It's been Nin, and I'm out.
Hello, welcome. You've made it to the end of the video. How did you do that? Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for making it all the way here to the end of the video. It was a long one. I spent a really long time, a couple of months. I started this video last year, and so I put a lot of work into it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give a like, subscribe, share it with your friends. It'll be nice to see more people have seen this. It would be nice for more people to see this. But in all honesty, thank you. I hope to see you all on the next game. This is the start of the Retrospective series. I hope to see you all in the very next game that I do. Hopefully I don't take so long with it. I might come up with it very soon. But again, thank you very much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. It's been Nin. I'll see you all on the very next one.